When I was a young boy, growing up in England, I loved to visit my Auntie Joyce. She would open her front door with an enormous smile on her face, and she'd say to me, "Hello, Alan, love. It's so good to see you. Come here and give me a kiss." Auntie Joyce was my favorite aunt. She was full of life, and she was full of love. Mr. Chairman, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests. Auntie Joyce had a heart that was as big as a house. Everyone loved Auntie Joyce. Every day, she would go shopping. She only lived a 10-minute walk away from the stores, but it would take her 2 hours to do her shopping, because she talked to people all the way there, she talked to people while she was there, and she talked to people all the way home. Folks would share their problems and difficulties with her, and she'd listen very carefully and offer wonderful words of encouragement and support, and almost always a big hug. Not only could Auntie Joyce connect with people, she was the same with animals. She loved animals. She was always telling her family that we could learn so much from animals if we would just be prepared to pay attention to them and listen to them. During her life, she fed many stray dogs and cats, and then for the last 7 years of her life, every single day, without fail, she fed a fox. She had a dish in her kitchen with a label on it that said, "Mr. Fox." And every day she would take that dish and she'd fill it up with scraps of food. And then last thing at night, at precisely 11 p.m., she would open her back door and she would put down the dish. And every night the fox was waiting for her. While the fox was eating his food, she would crouch down and she'd talk to the fox and tell him about her day. When the fox had finished eating, he'd look Auntie Joyce right in the eye and then disappear into the darkness. The connection between Auntie Joyce and the fox was a mystery to her family, especially to her son Nick, who had absolutely no time for this idea of learning from animals. In his words, he thought it was utter rubbish. He continued to feel that way until the last day of his mother's life. Auntie Joyce had been sick and in hospital, and the hospital one day called to Nick and asked him to come. She was not doing well. When Nick arrived at the hospital, it was late at night, close to midnight, and he walked to the front of the hospital. There was nobody around, except under a light by the front door, looking Nick right in the eyes, was a fox. Could it have been Mr. Fox? It's possible. Auntie Joyce lived close by. Nick ignored the fox and he walked inside and went up to his mother's ward. And when he got there, he found that she was sleeping. He tried to gently waken her, but she was too deeply asleep. Nick was anxious and agitated, so he decided to go outside and take a breath of fresh air. While he was there, he heard a cry. It was a mournful and desolate howl. Oh, oh! It's that wretched fox, Nick thought to himself. Why didn't he just go away? A little while later, he heard that howl again. Oh, oh! This time, Nick just ignored it. A few minutes later, he heard that cry one more time. Oh, oh! Suddenly, Nick realized the cries could be meant for him. He rushed inside the hospital. He ran down the hallway to his mother's ward, and when he got there, he saw a curtain around her bed. He gently pulled the curtain aside. The nurse who was attending Auntie Joyce looked up. She recognized Nick straight away because he was there regularly. "Nick," she said. "She's gone." Nick slumped onto the chair next to his mother's bed. He was so incredibly upset with himself. He felt he had let his mother down. He was not paying attention to the fox at the front door. He didn't listen to the cries outside. And for those two reasons, he wasn't with his mother at the very moment he desperately wanted to be there. Nick sat for a long time with his mum. Eventually, and with a very heavy heart, he left the hospital. He decided to stay that night at his mum's place, partly because it was close by, but mostly because there was something he needed to do there. During the next day, he collected scraps of food, and he put them into the dish labeled Mr. Fox. And at 11 o'clock that night, he opened the back door, and he put down the dish, not expecting the fox to be there. And he wasn't. Nick walked outside. He waited, and he listened. Then he heard it. It was a completely different fox call. It was strong and vibrant, full of life and energy. Woohoo! Nick smiled, an enormous Auntie Joyce smile. He stepped forward, and with joy in his heart, he called back, "Woohoo!"